I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are two best friends who do a deep dive into a new book series, one book at a time. And today we are starting season 2, and we are blazing through the Poppy Wars, reading some of the plot of the Poppy War, Arf Kuang's first book in her trilogy.
Yay!
So, yay, we're so excited. Hannah's only read the first 12 chapters, even though she said she was probably going to get to 13.
I'm like so far ahead. It's so exciting.
Hannah moved an entire apartment and had lots of drama that she's not going to get into on the pod.
I read this book a long time ago, so...
Laura has a fixation with orange covers.
I don't know what it is. I'm so drawn to orange books and red books. Like, go to the library and I'm like, ooh, orange, The Martian, must read.
I'm so glad you didn't buy the white version of these books, because you would have looked at them and have been like, no.
I don't like white books. White books are like boring covers. I don't know why. I love the colorful books, but especially like orange and red. I'm very drawn to them.
Okay, you know how like everyone has the conversation of like, we'll never know if like my brown actually looks like your blue. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I wonder about that, because I'm like, I'm not like enthralled by red. I don't know.
It's probably your blue.
Yeah.
But just I know like purple's like my favorite color, and I haven't picked up the Burning God yet. So I mean, there's some kind of block there, a mental block that I have.
I recently saw a TikTok about women who like collect things that are purple, and I immediately think of you, and I think they only come up on my For You page because I send them to you.
So I used to work, I've told Hannah this story, but I used to work at a different place, and on my first day there, I was just kind of like setting up my stuff, and I had like a purple coffee mug and then a purple bag, like a tote bag that I carried my stuff in, and a purple keychain. And my boss, like, came in, and he was like, is your favorite color purple? And I was like, yes. And he was like, the person whose job you're taking, her name was also Laura, and she was obsessed with purple to the point that we called her Purple Laura. And I was like... interesting, but she also had like everything purple, and I think it's just like something people who like the color purple, they just make it a part of their personality, where it's like, yeah, I'm this tall and I like dogs and purple and also Italian food.
Give me a big opinion of yours. Pineapple doesn't belong on pizza.
Pineapple doesn't belong on pizza. Purple is the best color!
I'm going to aggressively think about this for the rest of the day.
What color piece do you guys want in this board game? Purple!
It's purple or nothing. But that's little Susie's favorite character. I don't care.
Get over it, Susie. I have to be purple.
That is exactly how Laura is with children, everyone.
Pretty much. Pretty much. No, I don't play board games with children for a reason. Just kidding.
I just can't lose on purpose. It's in my DNA.
Whenever my dad and I play board games together, we get, or card games too, like euchre or anything, like, he and I have to either be partners or like on the same team, because if we're playing against each other, we get so competitive and we'll get mad. And so like my mom knows this. She's just like, you two better just be partners or whatever if we're gonna play euchre or anything, because she just knows how competitive that we get. It's a thing.
That is so funny, because my family is like huge into board games. We play lots of board games, and like because of that, I grew up around playing tons of board games. So I'm either like the least competitive person you've ever met who's just chill about it, or I'm not.
Yeah.
There's no in between. There's like, Hannah just doesn't care, or Hannah wants to lunge at you across the table.
I try when I play with people that like don't know me very well, because occasionally you get into situations where you're like, oh, we're having a game night at such and such place or whatever, or a trivia night or something. Like, people that don't know me, I try to be like low-key and be like, oh, it doesn't matter, when internally I'm like, how could you get that wrong?
Well, it also doesn't help that like if you were raised with board games, I'm like inherently competent in all board games, but that doesn't mean I'm good at all board games. But I'm good enough to be frustrated when I'm bad.
Right.
And so that's also not healthy. So I have to explain to people, like, it's not you, it's me. It's not you, it's me.
Right.
It's not you, it's me. I'm so sorry.
I totally get that.
I don't play a ton of board games with people I don't know outside my family. It's a very specific context.
Yeah,
so.
I totally get that.
I just think it's funny that you're like, I can't play with children.
I mean, I actually really do like kids. I just am very competitive at most board games and trivia in general.
That's amazing. But, Laura, before we get into the competitiveness that happens in the Poppy War, what are you reading, watching, and or enjoying?
So, I just finished this book. I'm going to look up the author just so I can...
Oh, I know what this book was because I almost bought it for Laura's birthday
list.
So,
the book is When We Were Vikings. And the author... Let me look him up here just so I can... Andrew MacDonald, I'm pretty sure is his name.
Okay.
Yeah, Andrew David MacDonald. So, this book, I am shocked by the high ratings that it has received. Honestly, I got shocked. And I don't know if people are just like, wow, how, like, cool of him to make such a leap with his writing and do something so out there. But I don't think it's that out there. I don't know the author's background with people with developmental disabilities, but this is a book about a woman named Zelda who has fetal alcohol syndrome, and she has modeled her life wanting to be like a Viking and to live out a legend like a Viking. Okay, the concept there is fine. You learn more. Total spoilers for this entire book. I'm spoiling the whole thing because I did not think it was a very good book. I thought it was very problematic. So I'm giving you all my thoughts. If you want to go read it, go read it. Or skip ahead if you don't want to hear all these spoilers. Maybe 5 minutes. Because I'm going to go on a rant, people. I'm going on a rant.
Let's put this... Okay, so some context before she gets into it. Like I said, I was going to add this to Laura's 30th birthday gift. And legitimately saw some reviews that were huge red flags about, I think, all of the problems Laura's about to get into. And, like, knowing Laura, after reading those reviews, I was like, I can't. I had bought the book. It's in my car. And I was just kind of like, I can't buy Laura this book. I can't wrap it. And I legitimately, like, picked another book off my shelves instead of giving this one to you. So I'm so glad I wasn't wrong.
I don't regret reading this, but I worry about the message that people will get from this book.
Right.
And okay, so just a little background on the book itself and what it's about. It's about a woman named Zelda. She, I think, she's in her 20s, and she lives with her brother Gert. She has fetal alcohol syndrome. She goes to a community center. She has a job. She does all these other things. She has modeled her life trying to be like a Viking. She has a set of rules for herself that she tries to live by in order to live out this Viking legend that she wants for her life. She has a boyfriend. And all of these things are fine. When you start to add in some of the other things in this plot is where it gets icky to me. This situation with her family is she grows up in a bad situation. They had lived with their uncle. Her and her brother lived with their uncle originally, and he was abusive towards her and her brother. And her brother uses some connections with a local gang and starts kind of becoming like a runner for drugs. And obviously that's not a great situation, so he gets them into sticky situations for a while, but they eventually are able to move out from their uncle's home into their own place. And Gert gets into college, and she thinks that they're doing really well and everything, and eventually he gets further involved in this gang, gets out of college, and ends up getting Zelda involved in this gang as well. Not directly involved, but he's bringing her to things, and things are gross. Here's one of my main problems with this, is the sexual way that she is represented in this book. All of the men in this book are constantly hitting on her. They're constantly making comments about how she's hot or how she is pretty or how she doesn't look like she has a disability.
Ooh.
Although I am being careful in my wording because in the book they do not word it that way. They use terms that I do not approve of. And the men that she's in relationships with, she has her brother who struggles to give her independence and also struggles to protect her if that's his goal because he puts her in really bad situations. She has her boyfriend that she has met at the community center who is also a person with a disability, and the two of them, a big focus of the book is the two of them wanting to have sex. And that's fine. People with disabilities also have sex. However, the way that it is represented and made such a focal point in the plot of this book, it comes off weird to me. And then their sexual experience when they go to have sex is just really, really bad. And I would rather this have been represented in a more positive way because I think it reflects poorly on people with disabilities or developmental disabilities in particular having sexual experiences that if they try to have sex it's going to be a bad experience. That's not true. So I didn't like that. And then really just the way that the other people that she comes in contact with in this gang, one of them uses her, pretends to like her and wants to be her boyfriend and tricks her to get closer to her brother. Another one attempts to rape her. It's just really icky. And then the way that it wraps up so neatly at the end and her gaining more independence, it doesn't come off well to me. And the way that the author really represents all of this and tries to tie it together. Some people have like quoted it saying that this is just a fascinating book and they loved it so much, and I just don't know how to feel about it. And I did not like it because of all the pieces that were put together to make it. If this were done differently or handled differently, I think it could have been a pretty good book. It was easy to read, that's for sure. I finished it quickly, but it was just something that really left a bad taste in my mouth. And like even at times when I'm like, okay, this is the feel good time, you still feel really icky. Even the relationship that her brother has with another woman is gross to me. The way that they interact with each other, it's just really unhealthy. And this, if you want to read it, go ahead. I'm not recommending this book just because I think it does not handle developmental disability representation well. No. It does not handle relationships with men and women very well, and it does not handle relationships with people with disabilities very well. And if you want to write a book about people with disabilities working to gain independence, you need to write it differently, because this one it didn't come off as the feel-good story that it's been hyped up to be. It's not that good. I have so many problems with it.
Okay, so a resounding no from Laura.
Yeah, I'm glad I read it because I think, like, just to give a slight bit of personal information, I do have some experience with people with disabilities, developmental disabilities in particular. So I am close to the subject, and I feel personally connected to it. So I do understand that, people with disabilities like to have structure, that they like to have lists, they like to have set times and rules for things. All of those things made sense. I don't have a lot of experience with fetal alcohol syndrome or know that much about it, but just a lot of the relationships, and especially the male relationships that Zelda had, are really gross to me. And it's a no for me on that one. 1.5 stars. Okay. So yeah, and I really kind of rate high, so that's saying a lot.
You're giving a lot of the benefit of the doubt for this. That makes sense. No, and I appreciate you coming at this with like kind of an open mind, but with criticism. I think that makes sense.
You're being nicer than me.
No, I think you did a good job. So I'm not going to read that book. I'm probably just going to throw that book into a lending library somewhere.
Yeah, probably. I just worry about the message that people will get from this. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like, if you don't know someone with a developmental disability, that people think reading this book is how all people with developmental disabilities are, you know?
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that that's like the kind of representation we have of people. And we just need to get better at creating more diverse media for people. TV shows, books, movies, everything.
Yeah.
So we can have real representation and not a lot of just icky things like this.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. And that kind of goes back, I just think sometimes people haven't thought through a lot of stuff. And if you're going to write a book about someone with a developmental disability, it's not great to have like a ton of trauma thrust upon them in this specific way. And like, I think that we should...
It does happen. It does happen. But just handle it better.
Yeah. And handle it with a little bit more grace on your end, even if you are interested in the detailing of that kind of stuff. You do have to be careful, because I can recognize that like people with developmental disabilities do not always get raised in homes where they have all the support
and they
need.
are subject to more abuse.
Yes.
Honestly, I mean, sexual abusers target people with disabilities. It is a thing.
So I think it's good to recognize all that, but to also treat it with a little bit more grace, and sometimes writing it from the perspective of the person can get messy.
I think a lot of times authors want to try and do something and like create a diverse book, but they don't go about it the best way.
Yes.
So I'm glad that people are trying to do that. I'm glad that the author was trying. I wish he would have tried harder.
Yeah. And that's like, it's a good note that people should keep in mind of like what type of book you're writing, who's the audience, and what's the message you're sending about this, because a lot of people who read that book probably fall into like, from the cover of it, I could see a lot of people who are like into light films or like happiness or like mushy gushy stuff. Not saying that's a derogatory thing, but like it's a very like pastel-y cover with like a nice picture.
I saw
of a
some
Viking
people
with a
saying,
parade.
"Oh, I thought this was going to be along the lines of Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine," and I was like, "Oh,
it's not."
Yeah.
And that's like how books get marketed sometimes, and it can be dangerous. So that's just something to keep in mind. Like I said, I actually know that Laura has some experience with, like, you know, what she was talking about. And so when I read the reviews, a bunch of them kind of hit a red flag for me, where I was, and that's only from knowing Laura and knowing, like, oh, these are all very big red flags. And, like, I think I could have possibly read this book in another lifetime. And knowing Laura and knowing that perspective and learning a lot about this as time has gone on, like, makes me sit there and be like, nope, not going to read that book.
I mean, I used to never really look into, like, trigger warnings about stuff, but the more that I'm trying to branch out in reading, I think it's more important to actually look into trigger warnings on things. And you probably come across mild spoilers when you do this, but I think it's necessary to read about trigger warnings.
I was actually just thinking about that because I have content warnings at the beginning of this episode before we get into the plot.
Definitely.
So I think that is important. And I think, like, people, I understand the whole, like, quote-unquote no spoilers, but there is still a way to look up, like, content warnings or understand that content warnings are there, even if you don't want spoilers. Like, there are ways to look up some lighter stuff. Like, even going into the Poppy Wars, I knew to, like, tell my roommate, like, hey, I know this deals with heavy stuff. I'm not sure what heavy stuff, but please be mindful as you, like, enter into this space.
Right.
And I think you can even say that kind of stuff and be like, if you're, and, like, the Umbrella Academy had a recent, like, trigger warning of something, and I, like, finally, before my roommate and I watched it, I had to be like, do you actually want to know what happens in this episode? Because something not great happens. And she was like, yes, please, I'm not in the right mind space to not be prepared. And she was like, well, I'm glad you told me, even if it was a spoiler.
Right.
So I think sometimes spoilers, you know, I totally understand not wanting things spoiled, but I also understand that content warnings have their place and purpose.
Yes, definitely.
And some people just do not understand that all the time. But
Hannah, what have you been reading and watching?
So I have continued my Sarah Dessen Summer with a new Sarah Dessen book.
Sarah Dessen Summer.
It's a great summer. I'm enjoying it thoroughly.
I just love it. That's the summer theme.
For Hannah. But I actually listened to her book Saint Anything while I was packing.
Okay.
And I actually really liked this one. It's one of her newer ones. I know I've said I've had like a ton of critiques for the newer ones, and I do have critiques for this book, and we will get into it. But I actually felt this one was like, again, it's her best lane when she like focuses on the problems of white people.
Sure.
Like how ridiculous they are sometimes.
Way to be self-aware.
So in this one, she was much more self-aware. So like, in this book, it's like a girl who's pretty privileged. Her name is Sydney. And we find out in the beginning of the novel that, like, her brother kind of got in with a bad crowd, like, at the rich high school they went to. And he had been to juvie once before. And then he was, like, sober for a while. He met up with this guy named, like, Abe before the events of the novel. And he was, like, clean for a while. And then, like, as he was sober for a certain amount of time, he goes out and he gets drunk and he kills someone by drunk driving.
Okay.
And so he is sent to prison at the beginning of the novel. And it's very much about her family dealing with the repercussions of that. And, like, she went to a very good school, very, like, high-class school. So she decides to, like, switch over to the public school just because people know too much about her. And it's very much about, like, how her parents are dealing with the trauma of their son being put away in prison. And I thought this was really well done on, like, the views of like upper crust white people in prison. Because like his mom is like very over involved, wants to fight the good fight for him without recognizing that like he is paying for something he did to someone else.
Right, and that there are repercussions for your actions.
And like there is a lot of complex emotions going on with the main character because she feels a lot of guilt and responsibility for her brother, and she's also angry with her brother for doing this and for ruining someone else's life, and she feels like her family is avoiding that topic, so she feels like she can't be comfortable talking to anyone about it. And like it really resonated with me for like high school kids going through something really complex. Saint Anything, and I rated it 4 stars, but they
I just got an email of this
about my ratings.
Bruce Books rated Saint Anything 4 stars.
But like I really liked that because I've had complicated emotions about family members before when I was much younger. And I also like I've told the story before, but I specifically remember a time in my life where like one of my cousins was going through a really difficult time and they were coming to stay with us, and through like unforeseen events I lost like my bedroom and had to share with my sister for a while, and the way I reacted was so infantile, and I was like throwing things, and I was like 14, and like later on in life I was talking about that guilt, and my parents were like, Hannah, we just felt sorry for like we just wanted to support you in that moment because you were a kid and you were hurting. And I think like this book really resonated with me on that level of like what can happen if parents don't understand like complex emotions of teenagers. And like there's a lot of like we need to support your brother, we need to, without like recognizing that she needs support in her complex feelings, and like her feelings are okay and they're valid even if like she can't, you know, deal with them in a certain way that she'd like to. And so I really liked the book on that level. Of course, it's a Sarah Dessen book, so there is a romance. And this is where I kind of had an issue with the book. So the main character's love interest was a person who happened to be fat once upon a time and lost a ton of weight. But the way this man's like weight loss journey was handled made me wonder if he had an eating disorder. And that's something we don't talk about enough is like male eating disorders. And I think in the book it's meant to be like, isn't it so quirky that like he refuses to eat anything bad. He eats like his snacks were like quote unquote dessert were like these like very specific type of crackers with hummus, and that's all he's allowed to eat. And like he talks a very like there's a ton of male centered fat phobia in this, where like he talks about like, well, when I was fat no one saw me, or like I was only fat because I would only eat junk ever, I wasn't healthy at all. And those are like fat phobia is a very big deal. It's not handled enough about men, like, and everything about this I was like, please tell me at the end of this they recognize that this kid has an eating disorder. And
well, I was gonna say the line between food anxiety to eating disorder I think is often blurred, because people will just be like, oh, they just have like food anxiety, And that's a thing that exists, especially, people with allergies or something like that. Like, people have peanut allergies, you would have a lot of food anxiety, but when you are so immersed in diet culture like we are now, I think it's really easy to develop food anxiety and be worrying, oh, I can't have this Oreo because I just had a Twix 2 hours ago, and that really ruins my day. I've been doing so good, so now I have to eat really healthy the next few days to make up for those 2 treats that I had. And so then food anxiety, the more you kind of pile those things up on each other, then it starts to slowly become, or quickly, disordered eating.
Yes. And I thought that it was very specifically, like, his eating was disordered. And it was weirdly mixed with a lot of, like, he has a really skinny sister who eats, like, popsicles all the time, and fries are her main food, and she loves fast food. And it's that view of, like, isn't it so quirky that they both have eating issues, but it's like, but the sisters are okay because she was never fat.
Yeah.
And that's also very inaccurate. Like, thin people can be incredibly unhealthy as well.
Yes.
And I'm not saying his sister was unhealthy. It seemed like she was a normal teenage girl, but she got to be a normal teenage girl because she was aesthetically pleasing to people.
Sure.
And he was not, because he was, heavy. I do also think that, like, Sarah Dessen does a really good job, but some content warning, of showing, like, high schoolers trying to be groomed by adult people in this book. There are a couple of instances of that, and it shows kind of the perniciousness of it, and, like, there are so many red flags, and it shows, like, what happens if there's not a good support system, because there are a couple of times where she, like, the person is actively trying to groom her, and she's uncomfortable, but she doesn't think she can get out of the situation because she doesn't want to be rude.
Right.
And I thought that was a very interesting look into it.
Sure. Yeah.
So this book I enjoyed it. I did give it 4 stars. Every star that was lost was the treatment of the love interest. Sure. I thought it was really bad and distasteful. I think this book would have been a 5 stars for me had they not had that as such a quirky little outlook of disordered eating from a man. And, like, I think it glorifies, like, he has rock hard abs, so it's okay. And, like, that's also not something we should be teaching high school girls. Like, it's okay if this man starves himself. And that's, like, someone who, wrestling was huge in our schools. And guess what happened when you had wrestling? You had a lot of disordered eating that was glorified because boys wanted to, quote unquote, make weight for the week.
Right.
And, like, I specifically remember,
only,
like,
eating Jolly Ranchers, like, boys
dipping because it helped them, like, keep and maintain weight. They were, like, they specifically sold hard-boiled eggs for the boys because they knew that they would only eat, like, 3 of those before a meet. And it's just, like, that kind of, that's just not touched on enough in high school media, that, like, disordered eating comes on both sides. It is always seen from the female-centric view, which there are reasons, but I think we need to talk about it more where boys are concerned. So I was kind of shocked at how a book written in, 2015 did not even touch on that. Like, it was a little strange.
That's not that long ago.
No, it's really not. Like, and again, a lot of Sarah Dessen books feels like they were written in the early 2000s, even if they weren't.
Sure.
But this one especially, I was like, oh my gosh, how do you not see this?
Yeah.
Like, this is not good. So that was unfortunate. But then I finished Stranger Things this week. It was okay. I
haven't watched any of season 4. I don't know why I haven't, like, dove into this, but
I thought the beginning was much better than the ending. I thought it was a little choppy, and I think it's more of a setup season than anything else.
Okay.
But those are just my random views.
Is there going to be a 5th season?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the final one?
I hope so.
Okay.
I think it might be time. That's
the
like
kids
Umbrella.
Are getting kind of old.
Yeah. Oh, there were so many things where I'm like, they're not 15.
Yeah.
No offense to them. It's not
their
fault.
They're excellent actors. But
they're so good. But
getting kind of old.
They are all 20 now. And you're feeling the 15-year-oldness of, like, them trying to convince you that these are children still.
Did you have a negative thing to say about the Umbrella Academy?
I really enjoyed the Umbrella Academy. I thought it was an excellent season. I thought one of the episodes took things a little wild with no, like, warning. It was just like, oh, hey, remember how this entire season was leading up to these themes?
Was it the Footloose?
Never mind.
Come
No. The Footloose thing was amazing. No. Do you know how many times I've had a very stressful week, and do you know how many times I've watched that Footloose
I've watched that a million times because I think it's so great.
Laugh every time Diego goes, we're really good at this.
So good.
Defending our honor, bro.
Defending our honor, bro. I hate Luther's accent because
he goes terrible accent.
He goes in and out of having a British accent, and then they just like
I think they know. Lazy.
I think they know that he like slips into his British accent at times, and then they're like, just let him work into it. Let him. Okay, he's back into his American accent.
Oh, we forgot
it's
to
all
warn
right.
you guys.
We won't try that again.
We're in the same room today, so it's a little bit looser than
yeah.
it usually is. But no, they let Luther fall in and out of that accent. Luther's storyline this year was wild. Let's wait like a month to discuss it to give people time. But like you and I should do a deep dive into reactions on Umbrella Academy after like a month or so.
Yeah.
Guys, like, get us more supporters so we can start a Patreon, and then we could just do...
We'll just talk about the Umbrella Academy.
But yeah, I just thought the season was so good. I loved Klaus. I love Five so much. I have so many thoughts on
Aiden
Allison.
Gallagher is a brilliant actor.
He's a brilliant actor.
He will have so many awards by the time his career is done. Unless he quits right now after the Umbrella Academy.
So funny the way
my words.
It is so funny though the way they like all. He's like, it's only been 28 days. I'm like, yeah, for you, Five, for you specifically, and everyone else is like, it's only been 28 days, and I'm like, it's been much longer for the rest of you.
Yeah.
Like, it's been so much longer for the rest of you. Let's not try to convince ourselves that you guys aren't all different ages at this point in time. Like, different amounts of time were spent in different amounts of places. So that was the one part that I was like, oh, that's a little bit wild. And then they were really touching on a theme this year that I thought was going to pay off, but it's not going to pay off this season. So
not yet.
And I just felt a lot of ways about Allison. So
I mean, that character, props to Emmy. She's doing a great job, but I think that they're stretching that character kind of thin.
Yeah.
They're wanting Allison to be so many things, and it's hard to follow as a viewer.
It's hard to follow, and it's hard when there's, like, no funness anymore. Like, because, like, a huge thing is, like, Klaus has wild trajectories. If you think about it, like, none of his stuff actually makes sense. But because he's a character who, like, you can kind of rip out and put, like, into random scenarios, that works. Whereas Allison is, like, one of the more grounded characters. So I think sometimes when these things happen, you get whiplash with her character that you don't get with a ton of other people.
Like, the character of Luther, who I thought I had issues with his storyline as well this season. I was just like, that one was even a little bit...
Like, it just makes sense, though. Like, you look at him and you're like, look... I guess this is happening. I guess, it makes sense.
And then there's Ben, too, and the, spoiler, new Ben, and it's like, even this is really out there, but it still works.
And it still works, like, when he has reactions, they're at least amusing. Like, because you're meeting this new person who has, like, zero context, and he's just, like, so wild. So I'm interested to see where they take Ben, but I feel like they also didn't give him enough this season. Like, it just felt like you could... I was a little bit less inclined to really keep following, like, the Diego Luther lines, because I'm like, you guys pretty much have the same trajectory at this point.
I think they have tried... they leaned a little too hard into making Luther dumb.
Yeah!
And, like, in the first season, he was not this dumb.
No.
The second season, him and Diego had a few moments where they were kind of like the dumb duo, and I think everyone loved it, so they're like, we're running with this. These are the two dum-dums. And it's like, no.
But, like,
no.
Diego season 1 was not a dum-dum.
No.
So, like, I don't quite understand
really think Luther
that.
was, though, either,
no,
as
Luther
much.
was just, like, sad boy. But, like, even Luther's made a little bit more sense, because I'm like, okay, I could see where, like, everything just falls apart for him. and you realize like, oh, I was never an interesting person.
Yeah.
And like I actually was just like isolated for years on the moon, so my social skills are zero. So like his actually makes sense, but sometimes with Diego I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot all the stuff you went through because you at this size of like time are not that helpful with the story.
And also at times I have to like remind myself, what's Diego's power? Oh yeah,
he throws knives.
Except he doesn't do it ever, and it doesn't really like work out that
power.
well.
And then people are like, why was he number two? Someone once said that like they actually think that the Hargreaves should be inversed, and it makes more sense going backwards than it does moving forward.
Yes.
And I mean,
I would almost swap Luther though back to 2 then. Because it's like, but I think just like your typical numbering, you would like have the strong one be number 1, but. I mean, it is what it is.
I just hate the whole, like, because it's always, I mean, this is the whole, like, mediocre white man joke.
Yeah.
But it's always, like, the most useless one, he's a good leader.
Yeah.
It's like, let's tell
when
people
honestly,
that mediocrity
Allison is the best leader.
Yeah, Allison's the best leader. And, like, yeah. Oh. She's the one who has the best relationship with all the siblings.
Yes.
It just makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Luther's just there.
Yeah. Okay. Although I did really enjoy it. I think it was Tom Hopper that shared a picture of him and David Castaneda, like, with David Castaneda, like, looking over his shoulder, like, they're both in this, like, really close-up picture, and they're both making, like, stealthy, like, svelte faces, and I was like, ooh, hot. But it's, like, for some GQ photo, I'm like, I'm here for it.
They are good-looking boys.
They are very attractive.
They are very attractive men.
David Castaneda, hot.
Hot.
I guess it's fine that he has 0 powers.
Yeah, because he is a very attractive man. Tom Hopper is, like, attractive in that way where I'm like, I would never want to speak to you because I do not understand.
I would feel uncomfortable because he's so attractive.
He's so attractive, but he's, like, also that, like, attractive where, like, again, we just talked about, like, male eating disorder. Not that he has one, but he is very, like, clean eating. And I'm like,
yeah, for sure.
I feel like you would talk all the time about your clean eating, and I would really rather talk to what's the guy's face who's Robert Sheehan, who's also very clean eating, but like in that weird hippie way, and it works better for me.
They have a podcast together.
They do. I know.
Love it. It's so fun.
So I love that they're best friends, but Tom Hopper intimidates me.
Yeah, I feel like there's just a thing with some people when they're like too pretty. Yeah. Like, and his wife falls in this too. His wife Laura, she played Klaus's mom in this season. Spoiler. But yeah, she and Tom are both like very into exercise, very into like very clean eating. Like, and when I say clean eating, I mean like max clean eating. And they like, research everything to
cook food.
I mean, I'm shocked they ever can leave their home because they're so clean eating that they can eat out basically. Right. But yeah, they're like really into health, but they're so beautiful. Like the two of them, it's just like I can't talk to this people.
I know, I get it. Okay, but should we... Oh, I also listened to a terrible audiobook called The Wives, and it was awful, and I hated it.
What was that about?
It's just a thriller where it's like she is married to a man who believes in polyamory, and he has other wives, but she's never allowed to meet them, and then through happenstance she meets them, and then stuff happens. And it's one of those thrillers that like got produced in the 2000s that I'm over, but I was hoping for something better. I thought it was going to be like a little bit more mystery, and it kind of was, but it was more like, this is a great psychological thriller, and I'm like, not really. Like, it's fine, but you're wiling out on all the, like, shocks. So I didn't like it, and I gave it 2 stars, but that's neither here nor there. But should we get into it?
Sure.
All right. So today we're covering some of the plot of the Poppy War. We're going to kind of see where we go, because we are going to have a little bit of a context corner. Yeah. The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. Laura, this is for people who haven't read the book, this is a wonderful fantasy novel. Trilogy. It's supposed to be very good, and we have been promised that it'll be very sad. R.F. Kuang has said that you need your own bucket for your tears. Sure. So we are interested to see this like little bit of a dark turn after Wheel of Time into a kind of different type of fantasy. Yeah. we're both fans of R.F. Kuang. We've both read Babel, and Laura, this will be her second time through on the Poppy War. And because of that, Laura, do you want to give us a little bit of context of why R.F. Kuang created this book and the history behind it?
Okay, so just a little on Rebecca Kuang. She is a Chinese-American fantasy writer. The Poppy War was her first novel, and it came out in 2018. I'm getting all this information from a very reputable source, Wikipedia. Thank you. Donate to Wikipedia. Rebecca Kuang is 26, so the fact that she is so
makes me mad.
Smart, it just kind of makes me mad and blows my mind. And
I'm intimidated.
I'm so impressed by her age and how smart she is and how good her writing is. So she actually studied philosophy, and she has a master's of philosophy in Chinese studies, and then she has a master's in contemporary Chinese studies, and then she's pursuing a PhD in East Asian languages and literatures at Yale. So the Poppy War itself, I'm going to kind of be referencing a blog post on readbytiffany.com that was written by one of their contributing writers. Let me find his name. Kevin Yang. And he is a Taiwanese American writer, freelance writer. And so he wrote this blog post about the Poppy Wars and like everything you need to know about the Poppy War before you read the Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. So
if you want an even deeper dive, Laura's going to give us a rundown, but
I'm going
you can
to break this blog post down.
But we will include a link in the show notes, and we do recommend you read it because Laura said like he did an excellent job.
Sure.
And it's well worth the read, but this is just some context to help our listeners before we get into it.
Right. So this is a trilogy, and it draws from the Poppy War is a trilogy that draws from history and East Asian culture. And Kevin says that in his opinion there's two ways to come about this trilogy. That you can either read it strictly as a fantasy novel and like not look into the historical background, or you can look at it through more of an analytical lens and kind of think about the history that it's taking a stance on or discussing. So we're just going to kind of give a little bit of context. So the Poppy War is set in ancient China, and the plot line takes inspiration from history, specifically the Second Sino-Japanese War in Book 1 and the Chinese Civil War in Books 2 and 3. So if you look at the map in the front of the Poppy War, you can really see a lot of similarities between that map and a map of China, the Nara Empire being China, the Federation of Mugen being Japan, and Spear having like a lot of similarities to Taiwan. So in 1839 to 1842, and from 1856 to 1860, China and the United Kingdom fought two wars over China's attempt to suppress Britain's opium trade. Chinese losses were that they had to pay reparations, cede Hong Kong Island to Britain for 100 years, and open trade ports. And then Kuang uses Spear as a commentary towards how individual territories are treated as chess pieces. So a lot of these themes are going to be present in the books. So the bulk of the book that we're going to be covering now follows the Second Sino-Japanese War between the Republic of China and Imperial Japan in what was essentially World War II in East Asia. And the highlighting events are the rape of Nanking and Unit 731. And the book is actually dedicated to Iris. The Poppy War is dedicated to Iris, who is the author of Iris Chang, who is the author of The Rape of Nanking, which was like a really defining work for R.F. Kuang and really inspired her to write The Poppy Wars. So I'm just going to say you should read this blog post, but because as I'm getting into the next paragraph, it's starting to get into more about themes in the Dragon Republic, which is the second book, and I don't want to quite jump into that yet.
We will have future context corners.
But, yeah, there are parallels between the characters and people in actual history in East Asia. And so there's that. There's also the 12 provinces in the Poppy War are kind of related to the zodiac signs, the Chinese zodiac signs. The gods and the mythology are all kind of fictionalized, but they're based loosely on the Zhao dynasties that are filled with stories about like spirits and gods and heroes. And then another thing just to mention is the discussion on colorism and the different ethnicities within the Poppy War, and how there is a lot of discussion based on the color of people's skin, how pale or dark they are. Mm-hmm. This is also very prevalent in the Poppy War as well, and we'll get into that more. But overall, I would say people should definitely look at this blog post. We'll put a link in, and it's just really, really well done. And there's also a link to an interview that they did with R.F. Kuang that was a really good interview. I watched that too, and I think that it really struck a chord with the author of this blog post, because he's mentioned things in this saying, after reading this series, I felt so proud to be Asian, and there's a larger conversation to have about reading BIPOC stories, and I think that these things are really important. So to come at this from just a standpoint of this is a fantasy novel, okay, but really looking into the deeper meanings behind this book and what it's based on has a lot of significance for people in the world, and especially East Asian people.
That is a great note, and a great, like, kind of, we want to make sure we're handling this with, like, all the grace in the world.
Yes.
We do recognize, like, this isn't, like, as character heavy as some books, like Wheel of Time. So we are kind of breaking up the way we do this. We are spending a month on each book, but it's kind of going to be what needs to happen in each episode. We're going to try to cover the chapters. We're going to do plot episodes and character episodes, like always. But we also have a fourth week that's kind of a wrap-up or a context corner, or, like, a deeper dive into quotes we liked, or themes that we'd like to touch on based on this. Of course, we always remind you that we are two cis white women.
Right.
So we are open to criticism or people coming at us with different contexts. If you know anyone who, like, knows a ton about, like, the history of China or has context for that, we would love to talk to them, as always.
We'd love to have them on.
We would love to have them on. So I just want to note that we're interested in this topic, and we want to do it as much justice as we are able to.
And please feel free to call us out if we're saying something incorrectly. And that goes even deeper, just if we pronounce names incorrectly or we incorrectly state this or that, please send us an email and let us know, and we will correct that.
Yes. And I will fully admit that I've listened to part of the audiobook and practiced the names, and will be trying to correct myself. But if Laura has to edit every single time I make a mistake, it may be numerous, and so I will try to correct myself in the moment. But I do recognize that hopefully by the end of this, I will be much better about my pronunciations and my comfortability. And like Laura said, like, reading BIPOC authors is important, which is why we wanted to highlight this book series next. Yeah. So we're excited to talk about it. We wanted to give that context and to let you guys know that at the end of this, like, month, we'll have a context corner if people want to, like, write in or say something or have us, like, fix something or do a deeper dive into things. We can do that to find something interesting to talk about in the fourth week, because that is what we're hoping for from this experience.
Yeah, definitely.
So with that, let's get into this. Like I said, in this episode, we will have some trigger warnings to self-harm, colorism, racism, and touches of, like, the classism that goes along with colorism and racism. So we open onto a 16-year-old girl named Rin who has to get a cavity search pretty much instantly when we arrive. She has to remove all her clothing because she is about to take a test, the Kuji, and it will decide her future, or so we are told. They are given rules before they start the exam saying that there is a bucket to urinate in the back of the room. And someone's like, what if we have to poop? It's a 12-hour exam. And they're like, well, we provided buckets. So
like, use the bucket. That's what it's for.
This horrible flashback to all the test taking I was required to take. Never that bad, but not great. That's you're not allowed to take your phone into the LSAT, and you're not allowed to bring it, which is very hard if you're traveling to a different place to take an exam. We do a flashback to 2 years prior. Oh, and we find out that she is in the Tikani Township. Tikani. Oh, I'm so sorry. The Tikani Township in the Rooster Province. Mm-hmm. She is lower income, and it is noted that this is testing day for all the provinces of Nikan.
Nakara, right?
Nakara. Sorry.
I think it's Nakara.
Nakara. Apologies. It is Nakara. I don't know.
Nakara.
We do a flashback to 2 years prior. She is an orphan who is placed with the family after the Second Poppy War. This family sells opium under the table, and they run a shop where she is free labor for them. And they have set her up to marry a rich man for a dowry with a matchmaker.
Yeah, because basically after the war there were a lot of orphans, and if you had one or fewer children, you were required to take in orphans, like foster parent.
Right. And I think it was actually under 3 children in the book.
Is it under 3 children?
It's under 3 children in the book. So they only had 1 child, so they had to take in...
Kisegi.
Kisegi. So they have to take in Feng Runen. So she is decidedly against the matchmaking prospect.
Sure.
So she appeals to the town teacher, Tutor Feyrick. He knows that it's almost impossible for his students to pass into universities and that they studied for years, and she only has 2 years before she would be required to take the exam. And she's like, I know I can memorize books. And he's like, well, you don't have an eidetic memory. You don't have anything working for you. And she's like, I have hard work, and I know that I need to do this. It is noted that you must study the 4 noble subjects, which are history, mathematics, logic, and the classic. He tells her that she has to memorize at least 27 books off the Kuji list. It is noted that Nikara is believed to have a defined social hierarchy, and although the Keju is supposed to be a meritocracy, it is the warlords who control who gets in, and she is not the type of person they want in a southern province.
Basically, it's just a lot of who you know and who you're related to.
And if you're rich enough.
Yeah.
So she convinces him that he's not getting enough kids in right now, and if she passes, he will get more students, and she will also pay him off with packages of stolen opium from her parents, or quote-unquote parents, noting
parents.
He also has issues with gambling, and she blackmails him into keeping her safe and teaching her what she needs to know. She then has to convince Auntie Feng to let her study, or Auntie Feng, and she threatens to tell on the opium business. She says that the tutor knows to report it if Rin goes missing, because her auntie will not hesitate to kill her, and this will make her son Kiseji hate his mother, because he actually adores Rin and would be mad at her. This is also
because basically Rin takes care of Kisegi all the time. They kind of just make her do everything.
Yes,
and she also has to raise their child.
She is free labor, and the auntie, this is an interesting section where she's like, you should just trick the guy you're marrying to become addicted to opium, and then just birth 1 child, and then you get to spend all his money and be his first wife, and your life will be amazing. And Rin is just kind of like, that is not amazing, that is horrifying to me.
Do not like that option.
And then Feng agrees to let her try, and if she can't pass, she will get married off. But she notes that she will not pay for any of the universities that Rin would get into, and so Rin realizes she has to get into Sinagard, a large military college that is more about getting generals, because that is the only place where tuition is free. She begins studying. She's studying as hard, like really hard. History is the easiest. It's note that there is like uniformity in what you have to learn under the Red Emperor, who, when he was alive, he did things like gave the people a standardized language, a set of measurements, and roads along all territories. And after he died, there were various heirs who got into infighting, and only one came close to conquering everyone else, which was the Federation of Mugen, an island country that attacked the Nikata on domestic turmoil, and it took 2 poppy wars and 50 years of occupation to win back the independence in Nikon. So
Nakara.
I think they also use the term Nikon.
Oh, do they?
I believe Nikon might be the land they're on.
Oh, okay. My bad.
So, yeah, Nikon is the vast empire located south of the hinterlands and the primary setting for the Poppy War. So it is like Nikata as like the entire...
The empire.
But it is Nikon, the territory they are in. Okay. So, we're doing so well. But Empress Sudaji is the last living member of the Troika, who sees the control of the state, and they still can't seem to maintain a unity. She knows that she isn't great at logic, but she's able to learn a lot. Like, there is the brain teaser of a scholar travels a well-trodden road, and he passes a pear tree. It is laden with fruit so heavy the branches bend over with a weight, but he won't pick them. Why? And she realizes, like, oh, if it's well-traveled, but it's a full pear tree, something's wrong with that pear tree. You shouldn't be eating off of it. And she can barely get her head around the classics, but she uses instincts, and she has huge nightmares about her future husband that keeps her fighting to get into this. Once she's 15, she starts to stop sleeping. The tutor tries to tell her to slow down, noting that a scholar put himself in pain to keep him from sleeping. And she was like, oh, pain makes you focus? And he's like, wrong lesson.
Don't do that, but I guess you're going to.
But she does start self-harming by burning herself to keep herself awake. We flash forward back to right after the test. She can't remember a thing. I have been there. There were so many times people were like, do you remember this question? I'm like, no. I don't.
It's gone.
I typed it all out, and now it's done. We also have a background that there used to be many monastic orders of monks everywhere. They had a greater influence than the warlords. But when the Red Emperor wanted unification, he murdered the monks and emptied the temples, and the gods still remain in tradition, but kind of in tradition's name only. So she does go to pray to the temple gods. It is a funny section where it's like the main gods are the white tiger, the black tortoise, the azure dragon, and the vermilion bird. They represent the 4 cardinal directions, and they're the main deities worshipped in Nikon. She tries to pray, but she gets confused, and then she just like smells incense, and someone catches her trying to smell the incense, and he's like, "Get out!"
Yeah. She has like, she is more agnostic. It seems at this point, where she doesn't put a lot of stock into the gods. It seems,
but also she does like later identify as an atheist. So
yeah,
I think like it's a weird agnosticism of like what atheists actually think they are, where they're like, I think I'm open to a god. And it's like, atheist is actively not into gods. But
yeah.
Agnostic is open to everything. But I think you're right. I think she's more agnostic. And then when she gets back to the town, she finds out she placed first in the Rooster province, and she got into Synagard. We cut to chapter 2. Even though she got the highest mark, there are tons of inquiries, and she has asked many questions about if she's cheated or not.
Well, because people can't believe it, because Rin is also a dark-skinned person, so there's a lot of doubts as to whether or not she cheated because she's a woman and because she's darker skinned and because she's poor.
Yes.
So
there's a lot of classism going on where they're like, how could she have possibly done this? And she is amazing.
She received the highest score.
Yes, and they just don't think that that's possible. I do love her because they're like, did you cheat? And she's like, sure, I seduced everyone.
Right.
Like, she's like, it's impossible to cheat. There's a cavity search at the beginning.
Right.
Like, what was I going to do?
It's also cute, too, when she... I say cute, but I think it's kind of a sweet moment when she goes to, like, look at the list and see where her name is. And she's like, I can't find my name. And she's, like, starting to freak out because she thinks, oh, great, now I'm going to have to be married off. But then she realizes that her name was on the top, and she just wasn't looking at the very top.
And she does, like, cry and hug her tutor, and that's very sweet. So they try to, like, pretend that she cheated, even though she didn't, so that, like, other people aren't insulted by her winning. Mm-hmm. And they have no choice but to send her off to Synagard, because it's pretty much like an official summon. Kasegi does not want her to go, but she does leave. She goes with her tutor to Synagard, who warns her to cut her hair so she isn't pulled into dark alleys. He also tells her not to get bamboozled by buying false things like alcohol or vendors who reuse oil, and she cuts off her braids that night. Then they travel with bodyguards and everything because it's not safe to travel, and they do get to Sinigard, to the famous East Gate, noting that it's emblazoned with eternal strength, eternal harmony, which is ironic because they haven't been peaceful in years. There is a Federation crew who are part of the... they're a part of... That's the Federation of Mugen. They are at the East Gate, and it's noted that like the Nikata barely won the war, and then they try to find a way to like get to Sinigard, so they hire a cab, and the cart hits a child. And then goes back and murders the child, and the tutor says it's easier to pay a funeral fee once than to pay for disabilities for the rest of the kid's life. So if you're going to kill someone, you do it right.
Right.
And they head up to the academy.
Dark.
Very dark. Very ominous. Once they are there, they are led around by a fifth year named Toby. There are 7 tiers to the academy, and it's a complex building that has various training areas. She asks about this building down like by the water, and they're like, that's an outhouse, kid. And there is another child who's on the tour with her, and he laughs at her. She says goodbye to her tutor. She is sad to see him go, and the tutor warns her that this Sinigard will like not be easy. It's going to be terrible, and they don't want her there, so they're going to discourage her wherever she goes. She barely speaks their language. She has a heavy accent that is talked about a lot in this novel.
Well, they have heavy accents.
Oh, they have, yes.
Because they say their R's, like they overpronounce their R's, and she makes a comment to one of her friends at one point, like, how do I, like, pick up on this way of speaking? And he's like, just really lay your R's on thick or something like that.
And to shorten her vowels or something. So, like, she has longer vowels. They do not pronounce the R's as much. And then she tries to remember that, like, this is still a better alternative than marrying a random man. Walking back to the area, she runs into the boy from the tour, and he is making fun of her about the outhouse comment and her clothes. She tries to ignore him, but then he insults her tutor, saying, like, he just couldn't make it in Sinigard. So she walks up to him and punches him in the face. He rushes her, but someone stops them from fighting. They say that they cannot fight. And the person who breaks up the fight asks the kid who he is. He is Neja. Yin Neja, whose father is from a well-bred house.
He's the Dragon Lord.
Yes. And he is kind of like, what did you do to start the fight? And she's like, he insulted my teacher. And he's like, oh, well, that is taboo here, so I'm going to let you get away with it. Then they quickly go to the main hall. There are about 50 first years there. There's a woman who walks in with 5 men and 1 woman. They're all in dark brown robes. The woman introduces herself as Jima Lane, a Grand Master and commander of the reserve forces and the commander of the Nikata Imperial Militia. The 6 people behind her are the Masters of Sinigard. One of the men has no belts on, and the others have different colored belts: red, blue, purple, green, and orange. The man with no belt has very white hair and does not wear the Red Emperor signage insignia. They are told that 20% of the students will not be there next year. People will go for a year and then test into a proficiency, combat, strategy, history, weaponry, linguistics, and medicine. And the guy without a belt cuts in, and he's like, also lore. And Jima is like, yeah, sure, uh-huh.
Right.
That
lore.
one too. Cool. And Rent didn't realize that this wasn't like a guaranteed place for the next 5 years, and does freak out a bit in this moment, being like, how am I supposed to do this?
Because she thought she had a home and was like, okay, I'm set now that I'm here. But it's like, oh, no, not the case. You still have to earn your place to be here.
So that's not great. And then they find out after that the apprentice who broke up their fight was named Raban. He takes the kids around and notes that this year they have 3 women, which is a record high. One of them is Nyang from the Hair Province, and then we have Venka from the Dragon Province, but she grew up in the capital. It is noted she is an archetypal Sinigardian beauty. She is pale, almost white, and willow thin. Rin says instead and Rin, like, compares herself, and she's like, I am coarse and unsophisticated compared to Venka. Venka insults Rin when she finds out she's from the Rooster province, saying that's why she is brown, like Kalmner. So a lot of very aggressive colorism. Classes are incredibly difficult. They meet their combat teacher named Jun. He tells them they cannot get into fights, and if they do, they will be expelled, mentioning the black eye that Neja has. And they will also be expelled if they are caught with Poppy. He asks about martial arts, and Venka says that she is well trained. She's been training since she was like 4 years old, and Rin realizes how behind she is compared to everyone else. Which is something
they've all had tutors and everything.
Which is something her tutor also warned her about. Like, they want this to be a pretend meritocracy to say people like you can get in, but they don't mean it. They actually hate you, and they think you're undeserving. So, awesome.
And the other students will mention at times to her, like, oh, the only reason you're here is because they had to fill quotas, and you're just like a filler. They don't actually want you here.
So, Jun asks Venka to come take a head off a wooden dummy. Rin thinks it's impossible, but she does it like without barely any trying. He asks how she did it, and Nyang says that it was ki, which she identifies as physical or spiritual energy, and Jun mocks her, stating that ki is about, well, he pretty much describes, like, physics. He's just like, you have enough energy in you, you can convert that energy into motion, and you can just do it effectively through martial arts to attack people, pretty much.
Which, if I'm remembering right, I feel like ki is a thing with acupuncture.
I'm sure it is. Because it's about circulation and everything, and so ki is about the energy that,
that's correct.
Yeah. Sorry. I know.
Acupuncture stimulates the balance and flow of ki energy.
Okay, perfect. Between the two of us, we knew why.
We got there.
We got it. I don't know why I know so much about acupuncture. But he's like, no, it's just physics. That's what martial arts is. It's like learning the fundamentals of how to move your body and to get good technique. And he says to always take advice of the masters and to not ask questions. And then they head to history. Rin is like shocked by how much she doesn't really understand since she's from a southern colony. And like they ask about the Poppy War and how the warlords were always preoccupied before. And then with the death of the Red Emperor, they started fighting amongst themselves. Yim, who is their teacher, asks about why the Federation attacked them because they were a peaceful, Nyang asks about the Federation and why they attacked suddenly because they were always a peaceful tributary. And Yim is like, they were never peaceful. We were always in skirmishes.
Right.
And then he asks how they won the Poppy War in Nicara because the Federation is actually better soldiers and we're always trained for this. And some of the classmates guess that it's the Trifecta, who we find out are the Viperous, the Dragon Emperor, and the Gatekeeper.
Tortoise.
Legendary soldiers against the Federation. He notes that they weren't like gods like everyone says, but they're political, and so they're important.
Sure.
And then Rin guessed it's because they raised the Heartland, where they took a slash and burn strategy and starved out the Federation. But Master Yim shrugs it off, saying that that's actually just war propaganda. And then a wiry-haired boy says that it's because they lost Spear. Then we find out that historically Spear was a small island nation, and when the Federation burned Spear to the ground and committed genocide against them, the neighbors to the west, Hesperia, intervened, and they had better naval ability, so they were able to stop the Federation from expanding.
Right.
And Rin does note that, like, they were pretty racist towards the people of Spear because they were seen as, like, barely human, and they were not seen as Nikarans, and after this, like, they were pretty much just used to intervene. And she also notes that, like, if any other place in Nicara had been attacked, they probably would have kept going until they killed the Federation, but since it was only Spear in their minds, they were able to settle a peace treaty because it was, like, barely a blip on their radar. It was just a way to end the war.
Right.
And the teacher also notes that the Muganese grow restless, and Hesperia is terrible at keeping promises, so they must always be ready. Everyone goes to lunch, and Rin is, like, definitely the person who grew up poor and is like, we got enough to eat, perfect, and everyone else is like, we're starving.
They're like, there's not enough food!
There's not enough food! And the wired kid announces his name is Katai, and he tested in a year early, and he has an eidetic memory. And she's like, oh, I'm Rin. And he's like, oh, you're the one Neja hates. And that he studied with Neja and Venka. And he expected them to be nicer to him since they shared a tutor, but really it didn't happen. And she notes that, he also notes that, like, Neja hates him because he beat him on the exam and, like, his ego was involved. And Rin is like, of course he's not going to be friends with you. You're too smart for him. He has to be the most important person around everyone. They all go to their class for lore in a garden, and they realize it's filled with poppy plants, and Venka, like, has a mental breakdown where she's like, we're gonna get expelled! I know. And it's very funny. I listened to part of the audiobook for this scene, and I was like, they make Venka sound so ridiculous.
I love the portrayal, though, because, and the narrator for the audiobook does a really good job, but it's so funny in this scene because she's, the way that Rin just, like, says, you can't just get high looking at the plants.
You don't get high by touching it. And Venka was like, that's not what they said. They said if we were in 10 paces. And it's just like, this girl is ridiculous for someone who, like, tries to make side-eye comments to Rin all the time. It's like, come on, girl. And so Master Jiang, the lore master, does not show up, and people slowly leave. They don't really understand what's taught in lore, and they think it's kind of useless. Katai wonders...
It's kind of a joke throughout all of the classes.
That everyone's like, lore's stupid. Who even does that? And Katai wonders if he teaches them about shaman, and how, like, shaman used to be these people who said they ingested drugs and were able to commune with the gods. And Rin is like, I think he probably just gets high. I don't foresee this. We get into, like, the classes area portion of this, like... The classes are super difficult. People are always commenting about this elite student named Altan Trenzgen.
Alton Trenzen.
Alton Trenzen. Thank you for that. They're always talking about him, and Jun is very strict, and Jiang is always, like, making ridiculous amounts of trouble anytime he shows up. Like,
yeah, like, he just shows up randomly, and they, like, say anything to him, and he'll just, like, make a fart noise.
They're like, what are you gonna teach us? And he's like, and just walks away.
Yeah, they're like, Laura's a joke, and he's just like...
And at one point, he's just, like, in a garden where Jun is teaching them all the fundamentals of martial arts, and he's just, like, singing dirty limericks at them, and he's like, leave, you're just here to annoy me. And Jiang is like, I'm not saying I'm not. Yeah. I do dislike you. And, like, at one point, he, like, upends a tray over someone's head, and he's, like, pet Katai in, like, random moments, and they tried to, like, cut off Venka's hair. He's just kind of doing whatever he feels like, which does play into a trope. We'll get into it in the character portion, but sometimes I'm like, do we always need zany professors as, like, the main teacher role?
I mean, I feel like the professors in media usually go one of two ways, where it's like the Mr. Feeney, where it's like, oh, he's the wise old teacher that we all love and respect, or it's, this person is totally weird, but I guess they turned out brilliant after all, because he's brilliant.
I just feel like in a lot of fantasies, it's like, what if Gandalf were even a little bit zanier? Yeah. And, like, it's like, then it would be Gandalf, but a little bit zanier. I've read about him a lot. Like, I just don't always understand the, you know, I'm not like the other teachers.
Right. It's like, yes, you are.
Yes, you are. You're still teaching. You still have your own beliefs. You're still a master. So, Jun is rough and with them, and he shows that, like, failure on their part is failure of a general, and, like, they could get killed that way, and they're going to blame other people for things like that. He, like, talks about a little, proverb of, like, the master of martial arts threatening to kill a general because they couldn't train concubines and everything like this. It's also, like, way too commented on that, like, Neja is, like, incredibly beautiful. Like, he's the prettiest man you've ever seen, and his, like,
from Rin's standpoint, that Rin is
perspective, she's just
talking, like, about how
he's so
beautiful
hot.
He is.
He's so pretty, and, like, apparently, like, the women in his family are concubines to the emperor, and, like, his dad is, like, the dragon warlord, so he's like very important. So Neja is incredibly important, to everyone there. So they watch a combat drill between two of their classmates, Jiha and Kirill. They show them various kicks, and Kirill notes you can kick a man in the gonads to incapacitate him. Right after Neja challenges Rin to a duel, and he, like, this is my favorite section because it shows, like, just the difference in their training and what you learn in military strategy versus, like, actual real world fighting. Because he's like, you're so stupid, you can't do anything. And then he starts doing a million, like, circle kicks. And he's like, you only know one kick. Look at all my pretty kicks. And then she just kicks him in the gonads. And she's like, you told me I knew one kick. It worked. And walks
drops
away. Him. And so after this, he, like, gets the classmates to kind of turn against her. And he, like, was part of the Red Junk Opera fights, so, like, that's why he was doing the complex skills. You learn that military families often have their own martial arts movements, and his family's definitely one of them, and it is, like, the spinning and the kicking that his family is known for. So, like, her kicking him in the balls was not a great move, and everyone is, like, alienating her, making comments about her skin color, her accent. She starts trying to work on it to assimilate more. And Venka says that, like, Rin doesn't belong there, and Rin is like, I got into the same school as you. That doesn't make you guys special. And she's like, of course we're special. We're from the warlords, and we're important, and you're just lowly, kind of stuff. All of a sudden, they're woken up in the middle of the night by Ray-Ban, and they go to see a combat challenge. This is the first time they've ever seen one. Alton comes in, and they find out that he is a spear, and like spearly people have red eyes. He is also very attractive and has long, flowing black hair and, like, dark skin, but the pretty kind is what Rin pretty much says.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. And he fights Kobin. So the Master Sonnen watches it, and Alton easily beats Kobin, and then Kuriel, and then Toby is the closing fight with him. And Toby actually kind of gets the upper hand from him and is able to do a tiger claw move that they say will, like, maybe make Alton shit blood. But Alton flings Toby into his forehead and then beats him senselessly. On the way out, people gossip about Spearleys, and they say that they were simple people who were not intelligent. They just fight well, and they can only be warriors, etc. Insert a bunch of racist things here.
Yes.
They think he's addicted to opium because of his red eyes, and Rin is like, I've seen people addicted to opium, and that is not what they look like. Like, that's just not accurate. After this, they're all obsessed with the Spearley people and ask Yim to talk about them. It's told that they annexed Spearley, which Rin notes means that they actually just put in a military force and forced them into militias until the Second Poppy War wiped them out. People claim the Red Emperor betrayed the Empress of the Spearley people, who was in love with him, and, like, killed herself to get the Spearley Council to support him. Yim is like, we don't actually know if that's what happens. It's just a love story that's told for, like, the sake of love stories. But regardless, the Empress of the Spearley people did die. And Rin asks if they were really fire shaman, and the people snigger away, and they're like, ha ha ha, you're so stupid, you actually believe in this. And, like, Yim is kind of like, oh, the people in the south still believe stuff like that, are you kidding me? And they ask about, like, why the Spearley people have these abilities then, and why the Mugen targeted them. And at first it's claimed it's out of convenience, then because they're scared of them, or that they were primitive. And it's noted that they were a quote-unquote war-obsessed race. Again, very racist.
Yep.
He asked about their ability to manipulate fire, and he says it was just like a rumor that was used to terrify enemies, and that they had bizarre rituals where they thought they could talk to the gods and pledge themselves to them, and how stupid they were. And then they ask why they never were taught to train like the Spearley people, and he's kind of like, because we couldn't handle it. Like, we're already too soft. You guys can't even do what we're asking you. So again, this belief that Spearley people were quote unquote built to handle things like this. Everyone wants to be Alton. She gets, and, like, everyone's talking about him. And then in some of their, like, fake combats, she gets into a fight with Neja, and he aims to harm her, and when he does this, she lashes out in a non-martial arts fashion, and she does beat him. Jun says that he cannot expel her, because then he would probably have to give some kind of punishment to Neja, and he doesn't want to do that. So he
He forbids her
from coming to class. This is also something I've noticed we've read about in like lots of these fantasy novels where it's like you are not allowed to have this very specific thing you need to actually move forward.
Right. Here is your obstacle to overcome. You cannot do this training that you will need to move on.
And aren't you SOL? And she realizes in that fight that, like, he favors the warlord class. He thinks she doesn't belong there just like everyone else. And that she has even been, like, quote-unquote, resting on her laurels just because, like, she hasn't been fighting enough. And, like, fighting with her claws out to get past all this because she needs to be here the way that other people do not. And so that is hard because she realizes the cards are stacked against her and the Kaiju meant nothing. And it keeps the lower classes sated, thinking they can... get that quote-unquote American dream. Or not the American dream, but, something similar to that when it is not able to get to unless you're in power. Kate comes in, and he's like, you need to apologize. Are you okay? Like, you need to get back in there. Da-da-da. And she's like, no, the Kaiju means nothing. And, like, this is all bull. And he's like, no, it's not. It's not. I have some foreshadowing guesses about that conversation. And then she starts sweating and she feels like she's going like mad and she passes out and she wakes up and she realizes she's bleeding into her sheets and she has like a moment of like meltdown. We find out that she actually just hasn't given a proper sex education, so she did not understand how her body worked or how pregnancy works. And she has to be taught like what a period is by a random nurse.
And I don't like this moment either because they all kind of like laugh at her for not understanding it, and they're just like, "Oh, whatever, honey, you'll be fine."
You're making such a big deal.
Quit making a big deal about this, and it's like, okay, if you had no understanding of this at all, it would be such a terrifying thing.
Even kids who know what periods are, it's an incredibly traumatic experience the first time you get one. Because, like, guess what? It usually happens when you're like at school, or it's like some embarrassing thing. And so the fact that, like, she gets it and then people just mock her for not having a proper sex education, it's like, that's not her fault. Like, it's not something to laugh at. It's something to be concerned about, But she, like, has horrible cramps. She's going through a ton of this. And she, like, asks the woman, like, this happens once a month. She had to miss classes because of how painful it was and, like, having to, like, bleed, And... someone mentions that she could become sterile if she wanted to this early on with like a couple of pills or something, but like who would want to do that because you do lose the ability to have a child.
I think it's just a small operation.
Yes, at the beginning they say it's a small operation. Yeah. But then she goes to talk to one of the doctors and he says because she is so young he can do it with like just a quick mixture that will kind of like empty out her womb and make her sterile. And she decides to go through with this because she cannot miss class that often. She needs to move forward. And she does think about, like, would she ever want to have a child? And she realizes she kind of wants this any more than she would ever want to have a child. And so she does take the medication. There is a little bit of, like, sometimes I wish Rin would understand the hypocrisy because she, like, comes back to class and they treat her like it's her fault that she missed, like, a week's worth of class. And she's like, but it was my fault. And I'm like, no, it wasn't. You have to take a medical decision, make a medical decision. So, like, it's not your fault. It's their fault for not having a structure to support you during this time.
They only have 3 girls there. So they're not really set up to take care of women's health.
Right. Maybe they should. And, like, even the doctor was like, I want a forced sterilization. I wish they would just implement this and say you have to. And it's like that's also horrifying.
Terrifying. So...
No, because every other woman in her dormitory does not want to give up the ability to have children, and that is also their right. So I was like, neither one of those is a good option.
I know. Whenever like that doctor said that, like, I think more women should do this. I've been trying to push people to do this for years. I'm like, forced hysterectomies is not really...
I understand
the solution.
The whole my body, my choice is an important part of that.
It's just like my choice.
My choice, not your choice. So anyway, that happened. And so she works hard, but she isn't content. She throws herself into class, and then she also starts self-harming again. She gets like, she realizes she gets like a high when she tests high in a linguistics exam, and like she starts getting compliments from professors.
Especially the strategy teacher.
Yes, and she's getting
She
like much better at strategy.
When he compliments her or says anything to her.
And he compliments her a lot because she's pretty off the wall about a lot of her stuff.
Yeah, she takes different approaches to things, and she just has a different perspective than a lot of the rich kids because of her upbringing and where she grew up.
It's definitely an interesting thing that I do want to talk about in our wrap-up episodes, like the theme of like classism and like what being desperate can make you feel a little bit like anesthetized to, even though you don't also... Because like a lot of these children hate her for where she comes from and would not think for a second that she was a person who like actually deserved life.
Sure.
But the second they go into these like little strategies that involve people like her, they're like, we can't just kill people.
Right.
And it's like they're more sensitive towards people who do not exist than they are to actual harm that they could commit and atrocities that they will commit later on. And they do not understand what actual blood looks like in these kind of things. But because Rin does, she is also a little bit more like callous than they are when it comes to making these decisions, because she at least accepts that it's her responsibility to make these decisions, and sometimes you have to like do something to win tactical strategy, and that is what makes her unique at this. But we'll talk about that more. But she does like catch the master of strategy, Irja. He asks at one point like, if the Federation had control of all these children, and they said that they might release them to you if you stand down, and then they'll be able to move forward, what do you do? And everyone is, but there's like no guarantee you'll get the kids back. And everyone is like not willing to sacrifice the children. And she's kind of like, burn it all to the ground. Because it sounds like if we burn everything down to the ground and we make it so they can't eat food and they can't live in that space, we've just killed off like a huge part of the Federation army. And will survive, even if it's hard on the other end. And everyone is horrified at like the thought of her sacrificing children.
You say that.
And she's like, well, you know, like we're told that you have to stop them and incapacitate them, so like you just need to make the hard choice. In another, like right after she says this, Irja is like, could you stay after class? And he like talks about an essay she wrote where she said that like, in this like strategy of things, that they should burn down a minor island that was on the Empire to get assistance from the outside world. And he asks like how she came upon that, and she was like, what we did to the Spiri people. She says that she believes that like there was evidence that the attack was allowed to succeed because people didn't care about the Spirly people, and they could die, and then Hespia would have to come help. And so like it was a strategy to allow genocide to happen in order to get assistance to help win the Second Poppy War from a people they felt like they could sacrifice. And he's like, yeah, that's probably a possibility. Like, that could have happened. And, like, doesn't denounce it. And then he asks about the Phalli simulation she just said about killing all the children. And he's like, why do you think it's a losing strategy? And she says, because I would win the tactical issue of, like, stopping the Federation, but I'd probably start a civil war. Because like you're making people suffer through dysentery and famine and all these things by burning everything to the ground, and they're going to have uprisings, etc. He knows that she's very bright and he may want her in strategy, but she's like, I've been kicked out of Jun's class. He won't like let me fight. And he's like, well, you're smart. I'm sure you'll figure it out. And it's like the way these teachers are so like can't go back on a master, and it's like you can tell someone like it's your job to teach, so you need to teach. Like it doesn't make sense. But she also knows that she has been working behind the scenes. She's not going to tell him about it because she did have to steal a book out of a restricted section that had like actual pictures of martial art movements, because that's what she needs to learn for the tournaments at the end of the year. She also starts watching all the matches to teach herself, and she always watches Altan. Or Alton, you said?
I just say Alton because that's how they say it in the audiobook, is Alton Trinzen.
Alton. Okay, Alton. And so when Rin often works in the lore garden because no one's there, she gets caught by Jiang working on her movements. He watches her and tells her that her placement is great, but her movements are actual trash.
Yeah.
And he criticizes like Jun on kicking her out and not teaching her. And he says that, like, Jun is actually a terrible teacher, and he hates him because he tried to get Jiang fired, and he doesn't actually teach the kids any fundamentals. And Jiang says that he will train her. He notes that she is stupid and hot-headed for stealing a book and getting kicked out of Jun's class, but he wants to spite Jun.
He's interested in her for a few reasons.
Yeah.
So, like, he's interested in her because she was kicked out of Jun's class. He's interested in her because Master Urja talks about her all the time and how she's so smart and knows all these things, and I can't believe that somebody from Rooster Province would be this smart. And then he's also interested in her because it's like, oh, she's actually trying. She's, like, putting in a lot of work to do this. That's interesting. She's got a lot of fight in her.
Yeah. And so he says that he will train her. And so the next day, they all, like, talk about him a little bit along with classmates, and they're like, oh, he must like you, because, like, he never takes on students, he never takes an interest, he just kind of walks around, and no one gets why he isn't fired yet.
Right.
And she's kind of like, well, he is a master, so, like, he can't just be here for no reason.
There's a reason he's gotta be here.
Why is he allowed to just upend trays on students' head and, like, almost cut their hair? Like, this man is a menace. Fire him. But anyway, the next day, he makes her run down to the village, which is like a 2-hour run, take a pig up to a watering stream, and then back down. And he's like, you must do this all before classes. And it's a very funny moment where they like
reminded me so much of Holes.
Oh, yeah, it's so much of Holes. But, like, it also reminded me of, like, it's just such a funny little ditty, like a little jaunt, because he, like, goes in and he's like, this is the widow so-and-so. She and I are good friends. And she's like, I am his drug dealer. Yeah. And he's like, she has a special pig. And she's like, it is not a special pig. And then he's like, play along. And then he's like, it's a special pig that must be taken up to a special stream to drink water. And she's like, he doesn't need this. And, like, she refuses to play along with him. And he's like, I'm just trying to have a little bit of fun. And you're ruining it. Like...
But basically, it's to build up her strength and endurance.
He says that she has terrible muscles, she has spindly arms, and no core. So, she has to do that. She starts smelling like a pig. It's noted that Jung has had no apprentices. Alton was as close as, like, any of them came, or Alton. And, they also note that Jung came from the,
because after their training, they go through a series of tests in each different division, and then after that they're given scrolls by the masters to continue their training, and it's, like, really rare for anybody to get more than one scroll. And Alton, he got scrolls from almost every single teacher, and he wanted to pledge lore really bad, but then it just didn't happen.
They said that Jung took away
his scroll and was like, no, I just changed my mind, you're not pledging lore.
But they also note that, like, Jung was from the Night Castle with the Sikh people. The Sikh people who are known for their brutality. They're kind of like they're
supposed to be like the Empress's trained assassins.
Yes. And that is where Jung came from. Lore has only been around for the past 20 years or so no one really knows what's going on with him.
And there's just, like, an air of mystery around Jung in general, just because everything that he does is random and no one's really sure where he came from, why he's there, or why he is the way he is.
He spends 1 to 2 days in the hospital a lot. Jun hates him. Creel says that everyone falls for him until they realize he doesn't do anything, which is like any school ever, where it's like, that professor looks mysterious, and it's like, I don't know, he's probably just a little bit of misogynist and kind of lazy.
Yeah, he's not doing anything.
We also, like, she asks Jung why Jun hates him so much, and he says it's because he killed half of Jun's men in the Second Poppy War. And she's like, did you? And he's like, I don't know. And so they're like, Jung also doesn't remember everything. He asks her about her classmates, and she talks about Nyang and, like, the way she talks about everything. He kind of goes through everyone, and she even talks about Neja and how much he hates her. And, like, but he never gets any repercussions, even though he harms students in tournaments because he is a warlord's son. And Jung is kind of like, yeah, they need to keep the warlord's children happy because they want to indoctrinate them and keep them in a very specific type of power. And kind of how, like, sending them here has its own reasoning, too. And it's also for, like, the good of Nikata and everything in their minds. So he starts...
Nepotism is good for all.
Obviously, because you can indoctrinate them and make sure that they believe in the government and never leave it. He trains her in the actual movements of martial arts, And he talks about how Jun also, like, often takes the shortcuts because they want to use it as, like, a battle. But really, this was, like, created by monks to make, like, soft movements to kind of be one with the world and, like, be part of their own body. And it's, like, he makes her learn how to meditate, and he actually, like, teaches her the proper use of all these, like, belief systems instead of how to militarize them.
Right.
And so she keeps taking the pig up until it's, like, so heavy. And then at one point, the widow says that she has to slaughter the pig. And she, like, bows to the pig. And she's like, thank you for letting me carry you. And the widow is like, you people are so weird.
Yeah, I love
that. And then she goes up to Jung. And she's like, hey, she has to slaughter the pig. And he's like, already? But she...
she does say, too, she's like, I can't believe that worked, because he actually grew really fast.
Yeah, she does say, like, I think it actually worked doing that. And so he, like, she's, like, Rin grows frustrated with Jung and his training. And then at one point she, like, starts arguing with him, and he hits her, and she, like, falls to the floor, but she's able to split the ground because of she knows how to, like, process the movements and where to hit with the key and everything. And he, like, gets super excited, and he's like, I want you to study with me. And she's like...
He's like, you have to pledge lore. You have to.
And she's like, so I want to be a strategist. I really love Irja, and I want to work with him. And he is, like...
heartbroken. It's sad.
I know. He's really hurt. And he's like, but I could make you into a shaman. And she's like, I just don't believe in that.
She's like... I think I'm an atheist.
I know, and he's like, I just don't want this art to die. He kind of mentions that the emperor, like, slaughtered all people who had any memory of this, like, shaman work, and so it's such a dying art. And she's like, I'm sorry, I can't be your artist. And
I also just love that moment between the two of them. Like, this scene itself is one that I really love because it's like she is so torn and wanting to please him because she's starting to develop this relationship with him, but she also really just loves Master Urja, and then he loves what he teaches and is so interested in lore in general and shamanism and wants someone to continue that, and he's also just excited about having a pupil that's, like, so good that he's like, oh, I can see all the potential here. It's just, I really like that scene.
I love that a lot. And after this, he kind of loses interest. He doesn't show up for any of their trainings anymore. But she doesn't have a ton of time to dwell on that because she's about to head into exams. She's really worried about getting kicked out. There's a tournament for who gets accepted. They also have some oral exams, but the tournament is kind of like the mainstay. It's noted that Alton won in his year and Kuriel hers. Nyang, her roommate, wants to enter into medicine, but only 3 get in. Venka knows she'll get into combat because of Jun and how terrible he is. And he's, like, training Neja when he's not supposed to be training him. Right. And it's, like, showing favoritism. Katai. I think
it's Katai.
Katai isn't sure, but he wants strategy since Urja can get him into the Rat Provinces division because they are army intelligence and he wants to be army intelligence. Neja has gotten a reputation for crippling people or ripping them to shreds. And then people are also trying to cheat. They're getting kicked out for cheating. They're getting caught. You know, all this stuff is going on. People are buying, like, fake things where, like, someone was like, I got this, like, old bark. And she's like, that's a ginger root. You guys have obviously never made your own food before. Like, so...
you rich dum-dums.
You rich dum-dums. There's not going to be a pool. No.
That would make some nice tea.
That would make some nice tea to calm your nerves. At one point, she goes to train in the lore garden. She runs into Alton. He asks about her studying with Jung, and she can kind of tell that he's, like, heartbroken that he doesn't get to train with him, and he just wants to. And he's like, I didn't mean to steal your spot. And she's like, no, I'm gonna go. And she runs away quickly because she is so overwhelmed with the prettiness and awesomeness that is Alton. And it's like, same, I've been there before, girl. Laura and I talk about the people that we all had crushes on.
I feel like also, like, he is just someone who's so hyped up by everyone that it's like, you forget that they're normal people.
Yeah.
And it's like, just because he's good at everything doesn't mean he's not a normal person.
This poor, like, 20-year-old boy is probably just like, I just want to hang out with people.
Yeah, like, I can't even have a conversation.
I just want you to, like, if you want to talk, I'm working with a trident. Like, I'll show you how. And she's like, I'll go. So she starts her trials. During one of the oral arguments with Urja, he asks like a bunch of different questions, and she is asked about why they won the Poppy War, and she said it's because they lost Spear, and how that helped because the Hesperians came in. She says that they probably knew the attack would happen to Spear. And Jen is like, no, we didn't. I was there. And she was like, actually, you weren't there because you arrived after the assault happened and everyone was dead. And he's like super mad. And Jiang is like, you can't get mad at her. She's answering
a question. She has her right to
free speech.
Like she can say how she thinks it happened.
And she's not calling you a liar.
There's no set in stone answer here.
Right. And then Jiang then asks her who is kept at Shulu Korik.
Yeah.
Awesome. And she ponders this and she says it's unnatural criminals who commit unnatural crimes because she has no idea what that is.
She has no idea what that place is.
And she's like, I know it has something to do with the mountain. And that's about it. Like, from context clues. Then it's on to the, combat trials. She realizes she makes one of the people nervous because she hasn't been in training with any of them. And so she is able to make him even more nervous
because they don't know how to predict any of her moves.
And like they've all been trained the same exact way. And she has like an air of mystery, just like Alton and just like Jiang did. Mm-hmm. And so one of them is like, you don't know any of these moves. And she's like, do you know that? And he's like, no. And then she is able to beat him pretty quickly because he has like incredibly predictable patterns. And again, this was taught in like a very militarized way, which means that there's no like there's only the uniform way and no like sense of how to actually see what the other person is doing.
Right.
And so she keeps winning because she's able to detect this in each of them. And she like keeps going up and up the roster. Then she has to fight against Venka and is told by Tai that people pull their punches for this woman because she is so pretty.
Yeah, they just like let her win all the time. Like, oh, pretty girl. Or, like, I guess you can win.
Or they don't recognize that like I think there is like an internalized like I can't hurt a woman. I can't hurt this person. But like she is still aiming to hurt them, so they're really just like not fighting the way they're supposed to be fighting.
Right.
And so she just draws blood against Venka, and Venka has like the biggest meltdown of any person ever where she's like, I belong here and you can't treat me like this. And it's like, yes you can, that's the whole point.
Exactly.
And she really just has like a huge overreaction after being hit 2 times and falling like a sack of potatoes. And she like just really hates Rin because she thinks she's better than her.
Right.
And then Rin keeps winning until she has to go up against Neja. It's noted that Katai he conceded to Neja to move forward because he just like kind of knew he wasn't going to beat him.
He's like, I know I'm not going to beat him. Why get so badly injured that I can't continue?
It's also mentioned that like she hasn't seen Neja fight because her like she was always up against someone else while he was fighting, and he always finished before she did. So Ray-Ben comes the day of her fight, and he wants her to surrender because Neja will go after her because he hates her so much, and he will like aim to harm her, but she refuses.
Yeah, he's like, you're already going to like do
you're
just fine.
You're getting strategy.
You're getting a scroll. You're going to do fine. Just concede. Just like get out of there. Don't let him totally disable you.
Rin can't let that go. So she starts to fight Neja and notes that she like barely has the stamina. He's much stronger than her, but like they do fight until he starts to get desperate, which is when he is the most dangerous. He claws at her face and then they start fighting, but then he slaps her, and like there's a moment where she's like, you can punch me, you can scrape my face, but slapping is a bridge too far.
Well, it's just one of those things where when she mentions it, she's like, she's so shocked that he would slap her, and it's just like such a quote-unquote blow, like a mental blow to her, that she's just like, how dare you slap me? Like,
and it is like, there is something about being slapped, I do agree with her, where like I do think like there's something where like punching is like a very physical exercise, or like clawing, or like fighting, but there is something about like slapping a person that's also
very
incredibly
emotional.
Demeaning. Yes. And so I do get it, like, but it is funny to see on a page where she's like, you can scrape me, you can punch me, but a slap?
And like their background, knowing how they've like been at odds all this time, for him to just finally just be like, oh, I cannot stand you, and slap her. It's like, oh my gosh.
And so she ends up like getting him down. She starts like punching him, and she wants him punished. And she starts slamming his head onto the floor until they break it up. And she realizes she's like burning up, so she has to like fight to get past people because she feels like the fire is about to consume her.
She feels like she's on
going
fire.
to harm someone if she remains there. And so she has to like get somewhere stay safe. And she gets to Jiang, and he calms her, and he like somehow cools her down.
And she's like, please help me.
And she then passes out. When she wakes up, he tells her that she stumbled into something she didn't realize, and she's now in like an incredibly dangerous situation, and she must train with him. She has no other choice, or else she will go mad. He says he didn't realize she was so much like Alton, and Alton during his trials also had like a huge like animus relationship to Toby during the trials. But he like bottled up a lot of like the crappy stuff Toby had been saying to him, where like she at least had the relief of always going up against Nisha like on her terms, but Alton was,
she was
like,
able to have a release, where Alton was just like, he kept it bottled and kept it bottled until he was able to do those trials.
And he notes that like Alton is also like, he holds grudges, he's reckless, and he also cultivates his rage a lot like she does. And Alton like blew up at Toby and pretty much like almost killed him. And it's revealed that he actually did want to train Alton, and that they didn't let him because they wanted to use him as a weapon. And so it's noted that Nyang gets into medicine just like she wanted. Neja and Venka. I put Venik for some reason. I don't know.
They go combat, of course.
They go combat, and Katai thought like he thought
he was gonna get any scrolls.
I know.
And he was
he's
like
so smart, and it's like, come on, Katai.
Master Urja was.
Urja is like, obviously you're getting into strategy, and then she also got into strategy and lore, but she chose lore. Yes, sorry, Rin did. After this, they have 4 days off, and this is just like, hey, what if we go to Katai's house and see how rich he is? Like,
which, I think this is interesting too. Like, in the like grand scheme of things, I don't know that we necessarily need this little section, but I think it's kind of interesting because it gives a little bit of background of Katai's family and kind of just further gives us that glimpse into the classism of everything. So
because like they go, and there is like a little bit of the underlying like misunderstanding of where people come from, where like they arrive at the house and the cook like wants to like cook whatever Rin wants.
Well, it's like even before this, she says something about like, I'll pay for a rickshaw.
Yeah.
And he's like, why would you pay for a rickshaw? Do not pay for a rickshaw. And she's like, oh, okay. And they have like a carriage that takes them.
And she gets to like see the rich side, but she's never been into the rich area where like she would be accepted. And like they get there, she doesn't even know what type of food they really eat because she doesn't understand like what they make, and like having any food at your fingertips. And he has to ask for like a fortune soup, which is like this amazing spicy dish. And like it talks about how she's not used to like these rich foods. It talks about like how everything is kind of at his fingertips when he needs it. He kind of discusses like he wished he could become a scholar, but he had to go to military school because he is the only son. And his sister kind of gets to do what she wants. Kanata, who is like studying at Yulu, the art of like building placements. So she's like
an architect.
Yeah, she's an architect. She gets to do what she wants. They also like go out and about into the market. She realizes how expensive things are and like how much she was able to rely on the academy to pay for like food and everything. So he buys her like a peeing statue that's supposed to be funny. They go to a puppet show where they talk about the warrior, the viperess, and the gatekeeper from before. There isn't much known on the gatekeeper, but it talks about how they went to the gods and were summoned by the gods. They had all been orphans and like predestined to walk with the gods one day. And then they like go before them and they ask them, like the gods ask them to kind of like be brought into their circle. And the Dragon Lord picked the warrior to become the Red Emperor pretty much. And then there was a goddess Nua who like went to the Viperess to like give her power. And then because like she prayed for that from a woman, it is made sure to say.
Yeah, she wanted a different type of power. So hers is like basically similar to Allison from
I heard
the Umbrella
rumor.
Academy.
You think I'm beautiful.
Where it's like, I heard a rumor that you will do anything that I say.
Yes, it's hypnosis pretty much. But then the gatekeeper did not beg for any like big favors because he didn't feel he was worthy. He asked to protect his people and the people he loved. And so they accepted that.
The Great Tortoise is like his god.
Yes. And so they were brought together. They brought together all the warlords, like, after the Red Emperor issues, and the Viperess poisoned them all. Katai notes, like, this is a much more barbaric story than he remembers. Like, seeing it as an adult, he's like, I can't believe we had these teachings.
Why do we
like,
tell this to kids?
Yeah, like, saying you just poisoned a bunch of warlords is not great, guys. But
which nursery rhymes dark.
Nursery rhymes are dark. And Rin says that she, like, actually, she kind of doesn't want to talk about everything, but she's like, I like the part about the Pantheon, because she realizes, like, Katai has, like, a bunch of, like, kind of blind spots that she doesn't want to get into. And Katai is like, of course you do. It's the only part that's pure fiction. And she's like, but how did those myths get started? Because, like, they survived a really long time. And he's like, that's just how myths work. Like, people glom onto them. They also relax for the rest of the week. And then she has to go to a parade where she sees Neja, but it's noted his father isn't there, and that's very strange because, like, everyone's supposed to come to this parade. And then she watches the parade, and this is the first time we see the Empress.
And she's, like, immediately, like, just...
she's like, she's not
beautiful person ever.
But she's also, like, the pieces of her are beautiful, but together, they're amazing.
It's, like, almost a terrifying type beauty. I don't know how to describe it.
But she feels hypnotized by her.
Right.
Okay, so they proceed back to the school, and, like, no one had to treat Rin because they're like, we don't have a band for lore, and they had to, like, chop up some white armband stuff. She starts studying quote-unquote weird things with Jiang, as she calls them. She says she wants to learn what happened at the tournament, and he tells her that she called the god, and the god answered. It's incredibly dangerous, and if she continued without training, she would have gone mad. She has to follow weird rules, and he tells her the connection of martial arts with the supernatural world and how it works. Rin notes that she believes she's an atheist, so she's incredibly weirded out by this and be like, I can't just call a god, they don't exist. This, like, also gets them into the religion of, like, they know Hesperians have one church and one holy maker. Guess who? And then she notes that there is a group of people who likely commune with the gods if this is all true, and Jiang is like, they do, and they're called shamans. And she notes that the empire is, like, superstitious atheists who, like, Nakata picked a religion that suits them, and they like pray when it suits them, but it actually is more about the control of the religion than actual beliefs in shamans and everything like that. He kind of tells her, like, nope, you're gonna learn how to commune with the gods to become a shaman, this is what we're doing. And he starts working on stuff, like, he makes her meditate. They have to work up to 5 minutes. I also have trouble with meditation, so I get it. She has to watch him get high off poppy to commune with the gods, and she's like, this is really boring. Watching someone get high is stupid. And he gets, like, quote-unquote high by taking the seeds, not the sap of the poppy flower, because the poppy seeds help him, like, kind of proceed to a different plane where the sap is how you make opium.
Right.
And then he teaches her about a term, entheogen, which is a generation of a god to merge with a person. And he notes that people are now putting worship and ritual over the actual theology of, like, communing and helping the gods. He notes that the shamans are dangerous for the empire because the empire wants conformity and obedience, and a shaman should be about being a vessel for the god to, like, commune with and work through, but not be a weapon for, and that is what the empire wants them to do. Ren wants to rush teaching because she wants to be a warrior, and Jiang is worried with who she is and all of her feelings. She doesn't meditate and doesn't seem to be as careful as she needs to be. He notes he's taken people into lore before, and, like, he once had 4 apprentices, but 2 were put away after going mad, and 2 were so dangerous they were sent to a prison in Bagra. It's noted that people are now scared of her, but, like, Neja is the new Alton after Alton left because he's being, like, worshipped by all the people around him for being awesome. And she's like, he didn't even win his tournament rounds. I did. Why don't they worship me? And Katai is like, there are rumors that, like, you're really weird and they don't understand you because you're not allowed to fight in the ring. And so they just don't know how to handle you.
Which I think this is so interesting that she wants to have that same type of Alton level
adoration,
and I find that so interesting with her character that she is kind of like, why aren't they treating me like that?
I think it's definitely something to get into about the characters, because I do think Rin is a fascinating creature of someone who, like, wishes they could conform, and, like, this is something that I think Kuang is like incredibly interested in, and like the person who wants to belong so badly, even though like by not belonging they're learning so much more,
Right.
and they're learning so much more self-understanding. But they would probably sacrifice that all to be told that they were a good commander. Like, it's like, no, I just want to belong. I don't want all this like pressure.
Jiang like comments on that before the trials and everything, how she is just like little Master Urja's pet, and how she just like enjoys a little pat on the head and some praise, and she's like, that's not it. And it's like, no, that's kind of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that self-actualization that like you might have to sacrifice being worshipped and adored if you actually want the power you say you're seeking, which is also a huge thing in this like beginning portions of this, is like her gaining and accessing power more and more. And so it's also noted that like everything's calmed down with with like the group of students, where they're not as angry with each other, until there's a huge split with like provincial and political lines as a crisis emerges when Federation troops go to the border of the Horse Province. Master Urja has to go like be a diplomatic party in this. We found out that like other people in the Horse Province are put in danger. Leja's father is accused of just sitting around while others die. And then the Horse Province starts to boycott the Muganese goods. So the Federation closes in and burns Nakara businesses. Their classmate Han like drops out of school to go help his father up in the Horse Province. And then a third crisis happens when there is a death of the Federation's emperor, and Prince Rohai, I think it's Rohai, yeah.
I think it's Rohai.
Prince Rohai comes into power. He is a huge nationalist, a young guy, and a new leader. The Empress from Nikata meets with him and says that the crisis is past, but people don't believe it. It is noted that Zhang doesn't actually remember fighting in the Poppy Wars. He takes like Rin up to the mountains, and he's just kind of like, there's a huge blind spot. But he's just trying to teach her how to, access the pantheon. So he takes her up to the mountain and he tells her to meditate, and she does for countless days. And suddenly like a form starts to appear. It is a woman in a washroom. She says that Rin has finally come, and the gods know she came. She is being offered a power that is beyond all imagination if she wants to go to the Phoenix, but she notes that the woman who met with Rin notes that the Phoenix will take everything, and it takes and takes and takes, but Rin offers like her blood to gain the power that she wants, but she is not afraid, and they note that she should be. When she comes to, she tells Zhang what she saw. It was a great circular room with a set of trigrams and 32 points that split into 64 with creatures on pedestals. And he's like, that's the Pantheon! And she's like, are you sure? And he's like, the same room that you just described to me? Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure, Rin. I promise. And she finds out that this is what Zhang wanted to do all along, to like show her this and to teach her balance. And then he's like, you're cured. You don't want power anymore. You've done what you needed to do. And now you don't have to go there anymore. And she's like, no, I want to do that.
She's like, I want to go there.
And he's like, no. And she realizes that he doesn't realize how she wants to use this power, and just wants her to study and become more knowledgeable, and like send her away to keep on studying. But she wants to be a warrior. And that is the end of part 1. Chapters 1 through 9. That's all we're going to cover, because along with the context corner and everything, we've just been talking for too long.
It's been a lot of talking. Sorry.
No. That's why we have the 4th episode. This is our first episode into this, so it is going to be a little bit longer. But guys, you should join us next week to cover hopefully the rest of the plot before this, and then a character episode and a wrap-up episode where we talk about anything you guys want to bring to the table, or anything interesting that we think should be like have attention called to.
Sure.
But before that, you should rate, review, and subscribe. Rating, reviewing, and subscribing is a great way to get other people to join in on the conversation as we blaze through the Poppy War. You should also follow us at Our Pod on Twitter and Instagram. That's OWWR Pod. Or email us your questions, concerns, or pronunciations at ourpod@gmail.com. We really enjoyed having this conversation, and we're so excited to start season 2. Yay! So come join us next week.